Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. It's me, your host, Amy Austin. It's December. This is such a fun interview. This month, I am speaking with New York Times and USA Today bestselling author Lynn Raye Harris. So here we go again. So I met Lynn on one of these beach retreats. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago. With the pandemic, it's always so hard. I feel like my son was 6 or 7, which would be 7 or 8 years ago. Wow. Okay, so the thing that's super interesting about Lynn is that she wrote Harlequin Presents, which she'll talk about here. The Harlequin Presents line, well, as far as the rest of us knew, it paid the most. It had the most international exposure, sold a ton, was translated into many languages, and also was very specifically formulaic. So if you have heard those tropes about Harlequins or romances with sheiks, and being in really quote unquote exotic international locations, then most likely those were from the Presents line. In my Harlequin dreams, I never wanted to write for Presents, honestly. I don't know if I could do it. But the writers who wrote for Presents, who later went indie, a lot of them did very well. And I think, at least in my estimation, one of the reasons is that they learned to write a very tight, compelling narrative in a short word count. And let me tell you, as a person who has too long of a word count, it is not easy. So we talk a lot about that. And also, um, she does horses. So, oh my God, when I was younger, there were girls, we call them horse girls, and they brought their horses to camp, to college, many places, and we talk about it. But she started early, and I don't think you ever sort of leave that love of horses. I don't know, it was never my thing. I mean, I remember the Black Beauty and whatever that, like the Elizabeth Taylor thing and all of the books and movies about women, girls, and horses. And it just, I don't know, passed me by. It wasn't the thing I wanted. I never got up and said I wanted a pony. I don't even know what I wanted at that age, but it wasn't a horse or a pony. So we'll see. I'm super excited, and I posted on social media that I got finally the advanced review copies for His Last Mistress. As you all know, I pushed back the publication date to April 24, 2025. The book is done, and I have copies. Actually, it closed yesterday. I had a giveaway for newsletter subscribers. I gave away 5, and it closed on November 30th. So if you missed out on that, keep your eyes peeled. I think the book should be up on NetGalley, as well as other opportunities for advanced copies. I love to read and get early reviews so that other readers can find the book. I'm super excited about it coming out. I love the book. I don't know if it's the best I've ever written. I'm not going to say that, but it's the best I've written lately. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Keep opening those newsletters, so you can get the information about the podcast, about the new release, and whatever else I'm working on. So with that, have a wonderful holiday season. And without further ado, Lynn Raye Harris. Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. It's me, your host, Amy Austin. This month, I have the absolute joy and pleasure of speaking with USA Today and New York Times bestseller Lynn Raye Harris. Hi.
Hi.
It's so good to hear from you. How are you?
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here. Pretty good. Pretty good. It's been a busy year, but what
I
day is
know.
it? I don't know.
I know. And it's almost over. November is actually my favorite month because it's my birthday. Um,
Oh, well, happy birthday.
yeah, age, but it's age. So I'm going to ask you, this is the weirdest first question, but how did you get into horseback riding?
Oh, well, I mean, that's one of those things that you tend to be born wanting to do. Like
Mm-hmm.
little girls, especially, either love horses or don't care. And I just remember from a very early age just wanting a pony. And my mother had the same affliction, so it kind of worked out. I got a pony when I was 5, I think, and I'd
Wow.
wanted a pony and dreamt of a pony. And ponies are evil creatures, by the way, but they're like chihuahuas. The smaller the horse, the more evil it is. So,
Uh,
but yeah, I rode as a kid, and then rode throughout my teen years and showed and everything, and then adulthood happens and getting married and all that, and I didn't get back to it until 10 years ago. My mom had started riding again. Like most moms, she gave me all of the lessons. I got all of the paid lessons while she
mhm.
was the supportive person. So she wanted to take lessons herself. And about 10 years ago, she found a barn and she started taking lessons, and she talked me into going out and just to watch. And it was a month later, I had a horse and I was riding again.
That's such a short window. You're like,
Oh,
horse.
yeah. My husband's head was spinning, let me tell you, because I told him, I'm like, oh, yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Never doing that again. It's a sinkhole of money,
Mhm.
the whole thing, right? And yeah, months later, I had a horse.
That is so funny. So I will say this, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but when I was growing up, we called them horse girls,
Yep.
and there were those horse girls. So where I went to like overnight camp, they had a separate camp for horse girls. So we were in, I guess, regular camp, and then they had ranch camp, so you could bring your
Mm-hmm.
horse. Um, where I went to college, you could also bring your horse. So I mean, I've met many people who could bring their horse places. I mean, and this is only in the Northeast. I have no idea if you can bring your horse places in California, but people like came to college with a horse trailer.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so I get it, and I've known them, but I didn't spend a lot of time with them because they were out with their horse, or brushing their
Right.
horse, caring for their horse, driving to the wherever the stables were, especially in New York because it's not, in the city,
Yeah.
and doing the horse thing. And you saw them with their cute boots, and then they were gone.
Yep.
So, I mean, I've met many horse people. I just, as an adult, fewer people are into it. Although, ironically, I think we have more means to do the horse thing than earlier.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it is, it does cost money,
Mhm.
because I mean, it's an animal that you have to pay to take care of.
Every
And
day.
if you show, that adds an extra expense. But the peace of mind that I get is so incredibly worth it. Not to mention the exercise, because I mean, you can join a gym and not go, and you don't feel guilty. But this is an animal that you bond with. It's like having your dog or your cat. I mean, you bond, not quite the same way, but they're excited to see you, and you feel guilty. I feel guilty if I don't go. And the other thing about it is, when I'm riding, I can't think about anything else but the ride. Because the kind of horse I ride, I mean, I ride a show horse, and
Mhm.
you got to be on your game. You got to be thinking. Your mind doesn't wander because you might find yourself on the ground.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I can think of nothing else but the ride, and that's kind of a nice place to be, because where else can you think about nothing except what you're doing?
No, so I have found, so as I get older, so I always had a number of hobbies, and the two that I've gotten back into, because over the summer, I think I was talking to Maggie Marr, an author that we both know, and I was like, I used to be able to turn my mind off, and I can't really do it anymore. And she's like, what are the things you used to do? And I said, there are two. I said, well, the one I still do, I bike almost every day. And I can't think about anything else because I can't be hit by other people. You know what I mean? I got to survive
Right.
that. And I got to be very careful, especially as I get older. But the other thing I do, my other hobby is like photography. And so I've recently gotten back into it and like took all the equipment out, sold some, did all that. And it's the only thing that requires like so much attention that I can't focus on the rapid things that are going through my mind. And then I also have found that when I come back from it, I don't want to say I'm inspired. I don't want to make it sound that deep, but when I come back from either biking or photography or something like that, my brain is sort of cleared out and I have greater ability to write the next chapter.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. It's like you need that brain break and you get it when you're doing something else that you're so immersed in that maybe your mind is working on the story way in the background and you don't even realize it, Right.
And I think that's probably true.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're done, you're like, okay, I feel refreshed. I'm ready to do this, because you probably have been working on it. You just didn't realize it, No.
And the other thing that I think somebody said to me recently, I don't know, like a PhD, I don't know if it's neurology or neuroscience or some kind of brain science, was suggesting that when you engage in rhythmic movement, it's one of the best things for your brain.
Yeah.
So people who walk, hike, bike, like the things that you do, probably horseback riding, the things that you do that involve like a certain amount of rhythmic movement are really good for the brain, creativity, etc.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, really.
So you only have one horse now, right?
I do. Last year I had two, and that was a lot. I leased one from a lady to show, and then I still had my horse. And so I had two, and it was double the, double the cost and double the time, really, even though I only took one to shows. But that was a lot. I learned one horse is good. One is good.
Okay. And the other thing I want to ask you, because the thing I've always heard about horses, and I keep thinking maybe there's something more to it. They're not the only animal, but they're an animal that doesn't learn their own name.
Huh. I mean, I guess that's probably true. I never really thought of that.
So you can call a dog and they come, and you call a cat and they come if they feel like it. But, but horses, I don't know where I was. I was out somewhere. I think I was in Iceland, and I was at some, the Icelandic horses. I was at some Icelandic horse farm, and they were discussing that. And the thing is, like, I don't know if I don't think about, well, to be honest, I don't think about horses that often. So, but when I think about it, I always think that's like one of the only animals that are herbivores that I think we bond with. Cause I think we're pretty much, us and carnivores are like thick as thieves.
Right.
But us and herbivores are not so much. And I find it fascinating, the bond that people have had with horses throughout history.
Yeah. I mean, well, they're incredibly beautiful animals, and they do bond with you. Maybe they don't know their name, but they know you. It has been proven that horses can remember, like, even if you had a horse and then you sell them and years later, you get them back or you see them again, they can remember you. That there have been studies for that, which is really incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think,
Yeah, I don't think that they probably do know their names. I think about it. I mean, it's probably the voice and the way you talk to them, because you're going to talk to a horse the way you talk to your cat or your dog,
right.
With the little baby voice and whatever. Not quite the same way, but you say stuff to them and they respond just like like I have a cat. The same way the cat responds, with the being happy to see you, rubbing on you, whatever. I mean, the horse isn't going to rub on you, but they're coming over.
Right.
They're also interested in a treat, but
it's for dogs. I mean, honestly, I treat trained dogs.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I mean, they know their owners or their people, and you do, because you're working as a team, you do learn each other. You learn the feel, like I can always tell if my horse is getting antsy or if I think he's about ready to do something. I can tell because I can feel the change, under me as it's happening, and I can stop it. And if it was a horse I didn't know, I probably wouldn't pick up on those cues. And the same with him. Horses are very spooky animals, they're very like, oh my God, what's that? Oh my God, what's that? But when they trust you, and he does trust me, if we're riding and he's like, what is that? And I'm like, it's cool. You're fine. Everything's fine. He's like, okay, all right. Well, I'm just going to look at it as we walk past it. I'm like, all right.
So is your horse water shy? Because that was always the other thing about, especially when I went to camp and all these things, people brought their horse. The environment was different than wherever their horse had been previously.
Yes. Well, they're prey animals. They're used to fleeing. Like on the plains, you've got the water buffalo or whatever, always running from the lions. I mean, that's a horse. They're prey.
Right.
And new environments kind of spook them. And my horse is not a trail horse, so I don't I don't throw on the saddle and go for this long leisurely ride through the woods or anything. Yeah, we don't do that. I mean, he's a show horse. It's very much arena based and all, but yeah, like a puddle that wasn't there yesterday. It's like, what? Oh my God, and it's crazy.
It's one of those things I've always wondered about. I don't, when I encounter people with horses, I wonder these things. And then, to be honest, I will not think about it for a couple of years. And then you come back and I'll be like, I wonder about that horse.
I get it. I see you're obviously not a horse girl because you're either born with it or you're not born with it, you know, and you were born with it. You don't have this craving of being near horses or riding horses or, the horse smell. Horse girls love the horse smell. It's that not the stall, but the smell of the horse itself. They have a certain odor to them, and it's like a dusty kind of odor, and horse people love horse smell.
No, and the posters on the wall and the pictures of them showing and them all of it. I've known them. I just am like, that's interesting. What did you read yesterday?
Yeah. Oh, I get it. I
especially all the horse books when I was younger, in the late 70s, early 80s, were really popular. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, I read them all. Of course, I read them all. And the first thing I ever attempted to write was a story about a horse. I mean,
really?
Oh, yeah. I was writing, wild stallions fighting in the valleys or whatever over the herd of mares and, different things, little short stories. I mean, I was probably, 7 or 8 when I was writing stuff like that because that's what I read,
Oh, that's fascinating.
I guess that's what you try to do as a writer is you try to, at first when you're learning, is you try to mimic what you love. So that's what it is.
Yes. So my first writing, and I used to have them. I don't even know where those little notebooks are. The steno notebooks from ages ago. So there were always these extra steno notebooks in the house, although nobody I know took stenography. I'm not sure why they were around. But my first stories were written in pencil and steno books when I was 7 or 8, but it was mostly about life in New York City. So, completely different thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So much. So I wanted to ask you, so how did you get into writing? I mean, past your elementary school years.
Past my elementary school years when I was a budding horse storyteller. I always got praised for my writing, even at that age, by teachers. I guess I had a pretty good vocabulary and, I had a fairly good way of putting a story together. And so I always got praised. And that kind of set up the belief that one day I was going to be a writer. And so I wrote off and on during my teenage years. I had, of course, a boyfriend and a breakup and thought I was going to write this just massive novel of our story about,
I'm laughing because I think I thought the same thing and I attempted it. We're not going to get into that. It's a notebook actually around here somewhere.
Right. I did too. Mine's probably gone because, military moves and stuff like that probably got tossed in a move at some point. But yes, I started it. I think I wrote 3 chapters and, I don't know, but I always just believed I would be a writer. And I read romance novels. I read all kinds of things. I mean, after the horse stories, I read Harlequin Presents. That was the first romances I was introduced to. And
can I ask you about that? Because, okay, so I read the first Harlequins I read were, they're the British ones. I have to go look on the shelf. The original, the super skinny, they were purplish. I don't know. The cover's probably sun faded, but the super skinny ones. I swear to God, they couldn't have been more than 40,000 words. Now that I think about it, but I found, okay, as you are at your age and thinking about the Harlequin Presents back then. Were you at all, okay, let me say this. How do you feel about how they portrayed romance? Because when my memory of this from the 70s, the books were from the 70s or
Mm-hmm.
80s, depending on like which grandmother's shelf I was futzing around on. They were
Yep.
a lot of like punishing kisses, bruising kisses, brooding
Yeah.
men who you knew they liked you because they stopped yelling. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But as there was something about it that I found compelling, and I didn't expect people to behave like that in real life. But as I think about it now, I would not write that kind of book now. But as I go back and think about it, I wonder about the audience and what they were trying to achieve. Because it was all alpha males back
Oh,
then.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Presents is still alpha males, and there's
That's true.
still a degree of that brooding billionaire who is autocratic. You know, he's
Mm-hmm.
autocratic. There may not be punishing kisses, but the idea of him being autocratic and in total control of the heroine, except for her spirit, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that's still very much a part of Presents, I believe. Um, because that's also the line I wrote for. It's the first
Mm-hmm.
books I read and the line I wrote for. And I haven't written one now in 10 years. But yeah, I had my women were always modern, and they were at least in control of their mind, you know, of their own mind, and they fought back.
Mm-hmm.
Not a physical fight, obviously,
Right.
but they fought
Right.
back, and he eventually had to acknowledge that he was lost without her, and you know, and give her autonomy, and not control her anymore. And I don't know why that's a fantasy, but I truly
Yeah.
believe it still is.
And that's, I understand, like, let me say this, because I think about it sometimes, because I was talking about with a friend yesterday who has like life problems. And I know the sense of like, I think she texted me this morning. She was like, I wish somebody could just come in and save it. And I was like, you can only save yourself or whatever. I mean, the message, but
Yeah.
I do understand the savior idea, but I feel like the autocratic is not the savior. So I'm still trying to tease out what it is. So it gave me like a certain feeling when I was a kid, which is why I kept reading them. You know,
Yeah.
I picked up the first one and I put it down and I was like, it was my father's mother, but I was like she lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn, but I was like in the bookcase where she kept in the basement, like looking to see what else there was. You know what I mean? So there was something compelling about it. But to this day, I can't figure out what is compelling about it because I stopped reading those and I started reading different kinds of romances.
Yeah.
But I always wonder what it tickles in the brain or what it fulfills, what need we're trying to fulfill or want or desire with those
Well,
kinds of romances. Yeah.
I think I know. I wrote approximately 20 of them, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I have an idea, and it goes to our friend Theodora Taylor and her
Mm-hmm.
universal fantasy, and it's Beauty and the Beast. Um, how much do
Wow.
we love Beauty and the Beast? You know, Belle is going to sacrifice herself so her father is free, and she gets locked up in this castle with this beast,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just horrible, but really he's not. He's wounded, you know,
Right.
and she's the one who tames him and teases that out, and he's actually very lovely underneath all of that, you know, and she's the one who brings that out of him. And yes, I realize that could be problematic in a modern
Right.
setting, you know, the whole thing. I think the only way to enjoy a Harlequin Presents is to realize it is sheerly fantasy. I mean, it's like Theodora always said about the universal fantasies. We like to read the beast. We love those stories,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the guy we want. You know,
No.
we don't want that guy. We just love to
No.
read it.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you come to write for Harlequin? What is that the first? Let me say this. Since you were reading them, so I read them, but I did not want to write for that line. I wanted to write for a different line. What made you think you could do it? I'm not saying, let me say this. A lot of people would like to write a novel. Many people do
Mm-hmm.
not.
Right.
So what sort of gave you the gumption to go for that and pursue that particular publication path?
Well, it is a circular route, actually. The first novel I wrote was a historical, and it was absolutely gigantic and chock full of everything that it should not have been chock full of, because I was learning, and that's what I wanted to write was historical. And then, and this was in the back in the day when you had to send it to someone and, hopefully they would request more and,
Mhm.
you would eventually sell the book.
Right.
So there was no Kindle. There was none of
No.
this. Yeah. So if nobody bought it, that was it. It was done for. Right.
It's true.
So I
Yeah.
wrote this giant historical and I had some interest, but I didn't sell it. And it crushed me at the time. I mean, I have to admit, it crushed me. And I
Mhm.
hadn't read Harlequin in a while at that point, but I was in my 20s and I kind of thought, oh, this isn't for me. I obviously can't write, and I went and did other things for a while. And my husband was in the Air Force and we got assigned overseas again. So we moved to Germany
Mhm.
and we were over there for a while. And I kind of got bit by the bug again and I started writing again. Only this time I started writing contemporary, but it still did not have the bright idea to write for Harlequin. I was just
Mm.
writing a contemporary. I had
Okay.
joined RWA
Mhm.
and so I had that, I had information on the industry.
Right.
And anyway, we left Germany, we moved to Hawaii, and that was the first time I could join a chapter where I could go to meetings because we were
Yeah.
in Germany. I mean, there was
Right.
no chapter over there. And it's the first time I could go to meetings. And it was a lovely little chapter in Hawaii. And I started going monthly. Obviously, they were lovely and encouraging, but it wasn't a big chapter. And
Mhm.
after 3 years in Hawaii, moved to Alabama, which is where I am
Mhm.
now, and joined the chapter here that was pretty good size and had at the time some high-powered authors,
Mhm.
Linda Howard and
Mhm.
Beverly Barton and
Mhm.
Linda Winstead Jones.
Mhm.
And they were all multi-published and had Linda Howard had done fabulously with her books, and they were very encouraging and just wonderful people to know because they were so encouraging. Came to all the meetings.
Mhm.
Um, and then I told you
Mhm.
this was roundabout. We had a writing retreat where once a year we would go to this retreat in this inn in Tennessee, and the chapter took over the inn for a weekend, and we just had a great time. We played a murder mystery game. We'd sit and talk. It was wonderful. But another writer told me that Harlequin was having a contest, and they were
Okay.
looking for writers for the Presents line. And what she said was, "You've lived overseas. I'm sure you could have that international voice that they're looking for."
Yeah, because Presents loves that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an international
National
voice.
line. Yeah.
And she said, since you've lived overseas, you could probably do it. And I thought, I used to read those things. I loved them. I thought, okay, I'm going to try this. And so I did. I entered the contest and I won. So that's how it started. It was the
So,
first contest that Harlequin had, actually, the
oh,
precursor to So You Think You Can Write. It was the
yeah, I
first
remember,
one.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what was the space between the historical and that contest? The
Oh,
time.
Lord, this is kind of embarrassing. It was better than 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
Probably more like 12 or gracious. It was a long time. It's a
But you knew
long
you were going to get
time.
back to because I'm thinking the same thing. So I joined RWA, and I would go to. For us, it was for us for where I'm in LA, but Orange County had the chapter with all the multi-published
Mm-hmm.
authors, and they did come, and I did go, and it was super encouraging. Like I think without that, I have no idea if I would have continued to beat my head against that particular wall.
Right.
But
Right.
they're like, it was actually one of the best women's celebratory spaces that I had for years. And so you'd go and they'd be like, what are you writing? Where did you submit? And they would celebrate
Mm-hmm.
submissions and rejections and acceptances and all of those things.
Yeah.
And so every month you wanted to come in, I sent 3 things or 4 queries or I got a partial request and all of that. So that was really, without that space, I don't know if I would be doing this in the way I'm doing it.
Exactly. I agree. I feel the same. It was the encouragement of the chapter because I had been like an at-large member of RWA for a few years. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I was able to join chapters and get that month-to-month encouragement from writers who were also trying to get there and also writers who were successful. I mean,
Right.
it was so was so great. And I will always be grateful to the author. She doesn't write anymore, I don't think.
Mhm.
Kelley St. was her name. She
Mhm.
wrote for Blaze, and she wrote some contemporary romances too.
That was my favorite line, so I know.
Yeah, Blaze. I loved Blaze too. I thought I wanted to write for Blaze. In fact, I was attempting to write one, and she's like, "Oh no, you need to enter this contest. You could do the international voice." And I'm like, "Huh,
Yeah,
okay."
but Presents sells better. I mean, it sold better.
Yeah,
The Temptation and Blaze and all that are gone, but it sold better. I mean, everybody I know who Presents was doing better
yeah,
than the people writing for Temptation and Blaze.
yeah,
Well, that said,
yeah,
those were still my favorite ones. I had so many, and I
yeah.
read so many. And then when I met those authors, I think the first time I met some Harlequin author, I don't know, I was in my 30s, I think. And I remember going to the table and I was like, oh my God, I started reading you when I was 13. And then I thought about it and I thought, oh, I shouldn't have said it. But I was just
Well,
like,
probably shouldn't have quite said it that way. Yeah.
I know. But I was just like, oh my God, you don't have no idea. I was 13. So how did you find, and this is the thing I wanted to ask about because I find this fascinating. So there's let's just say the like literary writer space, people do spend a lot of time. Okay. And when I was growing up in New York City, people spent a lot of time talking about the editors that could shape your writing. And this is mostly men, so they would get these editors and they'd work together for whatever number of years and shape their writing and like build this career and all of that. And spaces like that had not existed for women back then. But I found that people I know who wrote for Harlequin sort of had, how can I say this? I don't call it like, it wasn't like the ability to develop their writing in a way that made it compelling within a certain word limit.
Yeah.
And I always thought that's actually one of the things I think, me, I don't know about other people, was looking for because so somewhat similar to you, like when I was younger, like, I don't know, elementary school, whatever, people were like, you should write because you do that well. But I read and I was an only child, so I had a lot of time by myself to read. But I was always looking for like that sort of editor who could hone the raw whatever into something that was sellable.
Yeah.
And because I was not interested in being a literary writer, I knew those in New York, and they had to have another job.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, I was thinking about it because we used to go to like people's houses when I was young, probably too young to be hanging out with people like that. But how did you find the editorial process? Did you take to it?
I did actually. So I won the contest, and the contest was just at the time, it was you won an editor for a year. There was no guarantee that you were going to sell a book, nothing like that.
Okay.
And I won the contest, and I think it was like March. And then a week after I won the contest, I found out I was a Golden Heart finalist. So I had this whole,
oh wow, yeah.
wonderful year going at that point.
Yeah.
But I think it was March when they called, and it was like getting the call.
The call. Mm-hmm.
It was the most amazing thing. But anyway, this editor called me, and she was so lovely and complimentary, and said we would be working together, and she had a lovely British accent because Presents are edited out of London.
Yeah.
And so she was the first one I worked with. And I think because I'd been in RWA and I was accustomed to the idea that you would work with an editor, it just was natural to me to think this is how this works,
Okay. Yeah.
And I had a lot to learn because, like you say, you have to learn how to tell a compelling story. And for Presents, no more than 55,000 words.
I know.
50 is better, but we'll take 55. But 50 is better, is the way that they like to tell you. But yeah, you had to learn how to do all that. And she was really good at stripping everything out and telling me what I needed to do. Like I would send her the first 3 chapters, and then she would call me and we would discuss what needed to happen next. And then I would write the rest of the book and send it to her. And then she would call me and tell me what I needed to fix. And I would get an editorial letter as well. This was for probably the first 2 or 3. And after that, it would mostly be an editorial letter. And we would talk before I started to write. I didn't have to submit partials.
Right.
at
Okay.
that point. Once I completed my first 2-book contract, we would just talk about my ideas. I didn't have to do a synopsis and write 3 chapters and get the go ahead. I mean, it was just like, okay, what do you want to write? And then we would talk it out, which was awesome. But I mean, there was a lot of work in that I had to learn how to do it, but also I had at least 1 or 2 books that I had to rewrite, big rewrites. And then I had some that didn't have many rewrites at all. And it was a great process. And I think it served me well in going indie because I'd had the craft training, you know?
Yeah, I think so. I appreciate it's sort of like, I don't want to make it sound like this way because this is not how I mean it, but it's sort of like an apprenticeship in the way that, in a way that you get paid while you're learning things. I'm not saying, but it's good enough to sell, but it's always a learning and evolution process.
Yeah.
But being able to do that while also earning money is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you this, because I haven't read a Presents in a long time. And I feel like, did they stop printing? I feel like last year they went ebook and they were one of the last ones, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, they still print them. That line will still,
print forever. I think
that will be the last line of Harlequin probably that's still alive. If Harlequin, I don't know what's going on with them these days, but I'm sure they're affected by, the romance explosion from indies. Yes. But Presents still publishes, and I think they still do 6 books a month.
A month?
Yeah, I think it's still 6 a month.
So where were your locations? So for the few I've read, I always liked, because I travel, so I always liked the idea of something set outside of the U.S.
Yes.
And I really appreciated the location. So where did you set yours?
My first one was in Spain. And that was the only one I ever did in Spain. And then I did some Italian set ones, and then my own kingdom, principalities, and sheiks, because good grief, sheiks. I think I wrote 4 sheiks for Harlequin. A lot of Italian principalities, my own little countries, 1 Spain.
This actually sounds exactly, this is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's not any different.
Yeah.
So when you went indie, what year did you go indie? I don't even know.
2013 was when my first one came out, but I still signed another contract with Harlequin, and my last book with them, I believe, came out in December of 2014. So after that, I was full indie before that because, of course, I completed the contract and then I was done. I want to say it was 2014. It might have been 2015, but yeah.
Was your last contract like 1 book or 3? Because a lot of people I know
3. Signed
like a 3-1. Like I feel like a lot of people did 3 books in 2012, and they were trying to ride that, ride that line. It was very hard.
Yeah, I signed a 3-book contract because I had built up to the point. Harlequin was the moneymaker, and it's not because, you get a ton of sales in one place. It's because of all of the foreign money. Yeah. The fact that the Presents...
The translations, yeah.
Right. It went everywhere because of that global voice. People...
Everywhere I've ever traveled, I saw them in Peru, in March.
Yeah, women can relate wherever they are to a Presents, to that. It's a Cinderella story, right? It's Beauty and the Beast, but it's also Cinderella with, the usually poor girl capturing the billionaire's heart or the prince's heart or the king's heart. And so it's such a great universal fantasy, and they go everywhere. And so that money starts to trickle in. And by the time I started to see what indie could do, I was also doing well enough with Harlequin that I wasn't quite willing to give it up until I had some more evidence,
Yeah, I know.
So I signed that next 3-book contract, and I didn't regret it. One was a continuity. By continuity, they choose, like, they'll come up with a story, an 8-book arc, and each writer gets a different couple, and you've got, like, it's a family or something. Right. And it's basically work for hire, except you do get royalties. It's just Harlequin retains the copyright. Yeah, because they came up with the story. So I will get royalties in perpetuity for those books, but I will never get those books back. I did 4 of them. But my last contract had 1, and then I wrote a chic duet that I really had fun with. And I've actually gotten the rights back to
Wow.
those
Okay.
two books.
Yeah. And
Actually, I've gotten the rights to 10, but which is
so
nice.
I'm trying to think because I know an author, she retired, but she had just signed for 3 special editions then. I mean, I remember people like on that cusp one had done the Silhouette. Oh, well, like they're not Silhouette anymore. When Harlequin bought Silhouette, they did those. And so I know a lot of people who just like in 2012, 13, 14 were doing those and they signed for 3, one signed for 5.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to do both. And some people I feel like waited too late to go indie. So by the time that those contracts ended, indie felt daunting.
Yes, I agree with that. I feel like Harlequin, I don't want to say it was disingenuous of them or deceptive at all, but I think they could see the way the wind was blowing and they started trying to tie writers down by offering bigger contracts than they had ever offered. 3 was pretty standard.
Yes. I mean, you could,
but
I didn't see it as, actually, I never thought about what they were doing then. I just remember people were like, I'm thinking about going indie, but I just got this and I finally got my advance up to X or Y. Or, I can see them all in my head, all the authors.
Yeah.
And so 80-90% of them were like, let me just do this because I don't want to say at the end, but I'm getting older. The money's finally coming in. Like, it's sort of like all the work I've done all these years has come to fruition. And now they want all these books.
Right. They want all these books. I know somebody who signed, I want to say it was a 20-book contract. And that's just,
wow. The most I know is 5.
that's egregious. And this was not a known, somebody who'd been around for years and years. This was a fairly new writer with them. Someone I knew, I want to say it was 20 books. I might be wrong. It might've been 12, but it was a big number. It was a double digit. And of course that initial advance you're going to get, because you're going to get a portion of all of those books initially on signing. That's a good amount of money. And it is definitely tempting unless you've dipped your toes in indie at that point, 2013, 2014,
right.
And you saw what the potential was. Then you're like, wait a minute, hold up, and I'm thankful I dipped my toes when I did.
I didn't know it was coming because, to be frank, I'm going to be frankly honest. I didn't see indie working. I couldn't see it, but it was so. I mean, I joined RWA maybe like 2005, 6, something like that. So you know what I mean. There's some years that before indie started, and I remember a couple people doing it, and you're like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "I'm doing HTML formatting," and it's something I could do. I built websites before, like when they were early, so it wasn't the difficulty of it. It just felt like the distribution was going to be so small, even if the percentage was so large, that I didn't see the potential of it. But I'm not one of those future thinkers. So, I get what I get. So what was the first year that you did in indie?
2013. I remember I said I had finaled in the Golden Heart.
Yeah.
The book that finaled in the Golden Heart, I never sold it. I mean, for good reason. I'd gotten an agent.
But they call it the Curse of the Golden Heart.
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, the first 3 chapters are polished within an inch of their life, and they're fabulous. And then the rest of the book, because you just had to throw it together to submit a full book, it doesn't hold up. And unless you've got somebody willing to work with you, you're not going to get it polished. Well, I got an agent based off of the Harlequin win. I hadn't sold yet, but I mean, she knew it was going to happen. She took me on like, it was lightning fast. She's like, okay. And so I got an agent, which they say you don't need one for Harlequin, and you really don't. But I had this grand master plan that I was going to do single title, and I was going to have a big career. And
I think this was not all right. This was my plan. And I know a lot of people who had this plan. I'm going to write Acts Harlequins. And then because a lot of writers, at least in the 80s and 90s, did follow that path. I mean, tons of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Linda Howard did it, and I told you Linda was in my chapter. So, she had started with Harlequin. She might have started with Silhouette, but she wrote those books, and then she graduated into the big, paperbacks, single title, and then hardback, and, all of this. And so I thought, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get the agent, and I've got this book that could be the beginning of a different series. It obviously wasn't a Harlequin because it was wasn't quite a military romantic suspense. It had the military angle, but the guy goes back to his hometown and there's a murder and the girl he'd left behind. And I mean, there's a whole thing. So I didn't sell it but I didn't let it go. I thought, this is the perfect book to test these waters with. And I did, and it did very well because I think readers wanted things that weren't quite what they were expecting or weren't, they didn't follow a pattern, right?
Yes.
And so it did very well. And I thought, this could work out. And so I quickly wrote a novella. I made all kinds of mistakes. So let me tell you, I didn't tie things together the way I should. I mean, there was the whole thing. But I quickly wrote a novella and I put that out. And then I think I got invited into an anthology, a Christmas anthology. So I quickly wrote one of those, a Christmas. And again, this time I tied it, but not as well as I could have. It was all, I created this series with these military guys. And so I had that. And then I was working on the next big book. And when I put that one out in April of 2014, and I happened to get a Bookbub for free on book one, well, holy cow. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, are you kidding me? This has the potential to be life-changing, you know? And so that was the moment. Well, it was April of 2014 was the moment where I'm like, okay, this is the path.
This is so interesting. Okay. Yeah. Because I think that, so I published a book in March. I believe it's March of 2014. I remember, the book is, nothing has changed, but I remember the numbers and I was like, so is this, I don't ever believe anything's going to last forever. So I'm not that person, but I was like, this is something else because I had just gotten the rights back on a couple things and I sort of dilly-dallied about publishing. It's not that I couldn't figure it out. It was just felt like a lot. And then I did the book in 2014. I was like, I need to republish these other things. And I need to I learned, to tie them together. Like that, I was still going to the chapter meetings. People were like, you got to tie them together. It just can't be like a loose collection of things.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but I only wrote this one book to sell it. And then I just wrote another one because that was her best friend. And they're like, are there other people? And I was like, sure. And they're like, write those books. And I did take that advice and the advice was 100% spot on, but it's just not, I didn't have a business mind about it in the beginning in terms of like an ultimate arc of marketing.
Yeah, I didn't either. I made all the mistakes. I really did.
I saw people do it well, and I saw people rebrand. I mean, people have fixed it for many, many ways, but it wasn't so much a gold rush. It was just surprising because publishers had said for many years, people don't read. And we're not going to get into whether or not that's true. People don't read. They only want to read this in this narrow field of things. They, you can only sell these 10 things to people. And all of the things that sort of even I had been looking for as a reader were suddenly available. But I think that had to be true for other people as well. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day and she was talking about, this is funny, but she was like, somebody's sending me all these recommendations and tentacle porn is a thing. And I had no idea. And it's fabulous. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, Indy really created this space for whatever to exist. If there's an audience, it's out there, Oh
my God. You want to think about Chuck Tingle? I haven't thought about that in years.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. So did you think though, and this is the thing that I always felt and I was a little envious of because I did not ever sell the book to Harlequin, no matter how many editors I chased down at RWA conferences, that the ability to be able to do that efficient storytelling made it in India an easier transition.
I think it did. Because I already knew the rhythm of a book, even though my indie books are longer, but I had the rhythm and I knew approximately how much time it took me to write a Harlequin. So I could figure out with this book being longer, how much time it would take. I mean, I wasn't floundering around in the, oh my God, what's next? Other than the typical what's next that we do, even when we know what we're doing, right? But there's a rhythm. you know there's a rhythm. You can't just go on and on forever with them having lunch and meeting up for coffee and, you know.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I'm writing a book now, and my son walked by. He goes, "Are they still in that damn restaurant?" And I was like, "Yes." It was like, but clearly I will get them out or cut this out.
Yeah. There must be a point. Like when my brain goes that way, I'm like, well, there must be a point. And so I'll follow it for a while. And then I may even write the whole scene. And then later, if I'm like, well, there wasn't really a point, I was just filling space because I didn't know what else to do. Well, that's different. But I trust my brain enough now that I believe there is a point to it. And there often is. There almost always is a point to those scenes, you know. Something gets revealed, some, you know, emotion gets recognized. I mean, something happens. But I think before Harlequin, I wouldn't have gotten there as quickly. I would have been spinning my wheels and not knowing how to make those transitions and how to make that scene mean something. And I feel like also I had the rhythm after 20 books. I had the rhythm of how the production goes. You know, I mean, Harlequin was actually very fast. Between the time I got the acceptance and it was published was 10 months. And that is extremely fast.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, people don't think that now. They're like, oh my God, 10 months. But no, 10 months was very fast. And so I got that, you know, that idea, that rhythm going for how to get it done, knowing that it was going to be, I had to finish it. It was going to come out, you know, in 10 months. They had it slotted in the schedule. And they needed it by a certain time, you know, and.
No, that was the beauty of publishing. I remember the first one and they were like, it was April of 2013 or something like that. And yeah, it was April 2013. And I was like, well, and so the thing is like, I'm like, well, okay, so you're already slotted. They already have a cover. They've already moved on. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, so now I have to actually write the book behind this or finish or publish or polish or whatever I was doing behind it. And so that was always, having a slot was lovely. Although and people dropped out and they opened up. I mean, I learned a little bit about that jigsaw later, but I guess my question is, how did you come to trust yourself? Because I only came to that, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 books ago, maybe more. I'd have to really sort of think about it. But I woke up one day and I was like, so this process that I go through where the book starts off delightful. I have all these ideas. I get to 20,000 words. I would rather do anything else other than write this book. I would like to throw it away. Can I set it on fire? Can I like get it? You know, I start like, you know, like sometimes people come and they're like, oh, the baseboards are clean. I'm like, yeah, it's not going well. But I now trust, I'm still annoyed by the whole thing. I just clean the banister outside. But it's not that I'm not annoyed by the process, but I no longer worry that there will be no book at the end.
Right.
But how many books did it take you to trust yourself in that space? Because it's like a mind, I don't even know. It's so hard. Like it's a brain thing. I know that.
It really is. I mean, on the one hand, I always think this is the book that it's over. My career's over. This is terrible.
Yes.
Every time.
By the way, I'm going to tell you the one I'm writing now is the last one.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, you always think that, right?
Yeah.
This last book that just came out in October, I thought, well, this is it. You know, it's all over. This is awful. I don't know what I'm doing. So I think I don't know what I'm doing every time. Mm-hmm. But in fact, I do know what I'm doing. And I know if I just push through it, and I do have high achiever. I'm a number 3 achiever. So, and that's the Clifton Strengths for anybody who isn't familiar with that. And Becca Syme, you know, the Write Better, Faster Academy. But gotta plug Becca. She has definitely.
Well, she was a guest because we all talk about her all the time.
Yeah,
it was the number one thing that people talked about was her, Theodora Taylor, and Maggie Moore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, they're all 3 fabulous, and Becca really helped me learn some things about myself and how I work. But Achiever has just always believed that she could do it, and I have high futuristic as well. I think I'm a 5 futuristic, so the futuristic always sees the future and knows that we got this. You know,
right?
Even though in the moment, my number 2 intellection is like, oh my God, you're just, this is it. You're screwed. You know, you're just never going to get it. You're just, it's over. I always feel like I'm going to finish the book. But the quality of the book is what worries me. So I'm like, you're going to finish it and you're going to get it out there, by golly, no matter what. They are going to get a book on this date.
Right.
But will it be the book that ends everything? Because they're going to be like, what in the heck is this? You know? So.
No, I think that all the time. And I was actually just, it doesn't matter. I was logged into the author portal and I was looking at some reviews for some book and I was like, I never looked at the reviews, but I was like, oh, people really like this. I was like, I haven't thought of this thing in a while. But I didn't, at the time of writing, and I'm really struggling with this, it felt compelling. And I'm going to be honest, once I release the book, I sort of release it from my life. I don't actually think about it again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the same, except that mine are series. So I have to think about the couple and the arc, you know, how they fit. Because I found that my readers really love those community scenes where all the previous couples show up and the couple that's trying to get together in this book is there. You know, it's always like a barbecue or a dinner or a bar scene or something where they all get together. And so they're still on my mind in that way. But otherwise, I've forgotten pretty much everything.
I struggle with that. Let me say this. This is the most embarrassing thing I think ever happened. This is back when I used to be on Facebook way more often. I was writing something and I posted on Facebook. I was like, I just can't remember what happened 2 books ago. And I didn't feel like going to look back. And my audiobook narrator posts and he was like, this is what happened. I was like, you seem to remember better than I. But I do write series and I had to do a series Bible. Maybe, and actually the book I'm writing is not in the series. It's the first one. Like I wrote 15 and I think I'm done, but with that series, but I think that I had to do a Bible. I had to do all these things because it was just became overwhelming to try to remember details that readers seem to remember far better than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they do. Well, so here's what scares me. Every time I got a new book coming out, they'll be posting in my group about how they're rereading the whole series before they read this book. And I'm like, my goodness, they've read it way more than me. You know, I mean, what must they think? But they do it every time and they claim they love it. And so I guess they must, or they wouldn't do it. But I think, oh my gosh, what are the holes that they're going to find? Because, you know, it's like when you watch a movie several times and you start seeing like where they left something in the background that shouldn't have been there, or stuff changes from scene to scene, you know, or from viewpoint to viewpoint. And you're like, oh dear, that's an error, you know, but I wonder about those people who read the books over and over again, what they must think, but none of them have complained. So.
No, nobody has ever said anything to me. I think it now, except I did leave a cat out of one of the books. And I was like, I hadn't even thought about the cat. I mean, that's not my best moment. But I do wonder, but like some reader emailed me, I don't know if it was this summer or last winter. And she was like, oh, I was just reading book 3 and book 6. And it's like amazing that you like connected these people. And I was like, okay, if you say so.
Right. You're like, how did your brain just knows what to do, I think. I think that's a big part of it.
I think that's it. Yeah. I think that's the thing that, to be honest, that's the thing that Becca helped me with the most. I think, you know, the Write Better Faster. And I think, you know, you do the coaching. And we were on Skype sitting where I'm sitting right now. And at some point I don't know what I was saying. It doesn't matter. And she was like, well, how many books have you written? And I was like, whatever number. And she was like, so it works, right? And I was like, yeah. She was like, so stop trying to rig it, fix it, do anything to it. She's like, if it works, just keep doing it. Yeah. And it was like, people were like, what did you get from the writing coach? And I was like, she told me to leave the process alone. And it was actually the greatest sort of relief I ever got, because after that, and this is when we were all into Becca Syme 5-6 years ago, maybe.
Yeah. After
that, I don't think about it anymore. Like half the grief is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, yeah, this will work out. You know, it's worked out before, it'll work out again. And I'm not going to give any energy to the worry. Now, you know, the restaurant scene, I'm still giving some energy to because they're back eating again. And it's just like, I want to shoot these reminders.
There must be a clue in the restaurant. I don't know.
There's got to be a clue. Like I'm trying to build this sort of suspense. It's a psychological thriller, and I'm just really struggling with you're nice, but you're also evil. You know what I mean? And I can't. I'm walking that line, and I don't feel well. but I'm not going to worry about it. It'll work out at the end.
It will. That's the thing. It will. Even though you think it won't, it will. I mean, same with me and this. My books have gotten longer with this new series that I'm writing. I was always writing around 80, 85,000. I mean, Harlequin, of course, was 50 to 55. And then I suddenly had the freedom to do 70, 80, 85. And the new series, I mean, when that sucker was at 90 and hadn't ended yet, I was like, oh my gosh. And it came out at 104. Okay. And the second book that I just finished, that one was 90, I think, or 92. And so it was longer. And for me, there were a lot of those kind of scenes like, what the heck? You know, why are they just, again, why are they at the barbecue? Or why are they just sitting around talking again? Weren't they just having breakfast? I don't know. But it seems like there was a purpose, in fact, after all.
Okay. I will ask you this. So I'm thinking about the length because recently, so I'm writing this book and I got to 25,000 words and nothing had happened yet. I don't mean nothing, but you know what I mean? I was like, at the pace this is going, this book can't be 75,000 words. And so then maybe a week ago, I was on Kobo because you know how Kobo has the word count.
Yeah.
And so I was on Kobo looking at the word count of all, a ton of recent books. And I don't think I had realized that a lot of books have really gotten longer. So a lot of books I've read, and I was looking at Kobo, are in the 90 to 100,000 word count. Yeah. Which was surprising because I hadn't noticed the shift, especially with ebooks since I'm not carrying it around. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hadn't noticed the shift, but I think it's interesting. The thing I love most about indie is the ability to tell the story I want to tell in the number of words I want to tell it. And readers have not had, I was just talking to somebody about Kristen Ashley in the wallpaper or whatever. Readers have not specifically had a lot of pushback about that. I mean, there's always the readers who are like, I wanted the book to go on longer and can you have 15 epilogues? But I do know that, people do have a shortened attention span in theory, but there has been no pushback over the length. And I always find that interesting. No readers ever written me and go, well, this one was too long.
Right. Like you could have wrapped that up 15,000 words ago. I mean, I don't think they think that way. And especially in the romance space when they do want more epilogues about the happy couple and stuff. Right. I think they like those scenes where the couple's just hanging out, having breakfast. I mean, as long as they're talking about something, if they've got some banter, it seems like their relationship is progressing or whatever. I think they love it.
I just find it interesting because I came of age, as it were, in the traditional space where there were no alternatives. There were so many rules and strictures around what readers would like. And I'm always, I don't want to say surprised, that's not really fair, that readers are like, that's great. And they don't 10 out of 10, no notes. And you're like, okay. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. So what, other than presents, what in horses? Sorry, I'm laughing. I don't mean to laugh. What did you read growing up?
Oh gosh. Well, Nancy Drew, of course. Some Hardy Boys. Mm-hmm. And my mother had these big sweeping, insane, historical romances that were not technically romances. They were more like historical fiction, but very soapy, I guess.
I think of them as sagas. Those were popular.
Yeah.
Those big, thick sagas.
Right. And they always had a heroine who was downtrodden. I mean, they shared a lot of space with romance, except they could go across a generation. Mm-hmm. I remember there was specifically one about a woman who was married to Queen Elizabeth's, the courtier that, she had those certain ones that she always had in her space, and she was jealous of his wife. And I mean, there was this whole thing with, Elizabeth I, but, it was one of those. There was one about, Peter the Great of Russia. I mean, different stuff. I probably shouldn't have been reading them, let me tell you, but she had them.
I look back now, I think, but as a child and who was reading, nobody ever said anything.
Right. I mean, they didn't. And my mom had these things and they were laying around and I'm like, well, okay, this looks fun. And I'd get into it. And boy, I'd just be, I remember the one about Peter the Great, the girl that ends up being his wife and being the Empress of Russia. Mm-hmm. Boy, it's nowhere near accurate. I think it's based on loosely on history, but she was like a camp follower. I don't quite think they called her a terrible word then, but I got the context. And so she was, found in the closet with, a man attempting to rape her, I believe. I mean, it was this over the top stuff. And I was probably 13 or 14 and I'm like devouring it, I mean, it was just this sweeping historical story. And so I loved that. Gosh, I can't even remember what else.
So did you read, we sometimes talk about this like on the podcast, like I don't know, the other things came later, but like the Sweet Valley High, like those sorts of contemporary short series.
No, I think they probably came later. I mean, I was a teenager in the early 80s, so I don't remember when those showed up. By then I was reading the romances.
Well, I read both because I remember buying them because they were really expensive because they were hardcover, but they were only, I swear to God, 35,000 words because I would read it in like an hour. And I'd look up and I thought, did I just spend my allowance, walk down the street, go to the bookstore, come back, and that's gone. And I went to the library all the time and I really sort of hoarded the series books because I wanted them all. And I remember like Sweet Valley High, I feel like it ended in like I stopped reading in 1984 and I had like 50 or 40 or something.
Well, I would have been, I was still a kid then. I didn't read those, but you know what I did read now that I think about it? And my mom even bought them for me. She probably had no clue. The V.C. Andrews books.
Yeah, I read those too.
Children in the Attic and all that. I mean, oh my gosh. Horrible.
I don't know if I'm going to forever be scarred. Not scarred. I will never forget any of that. Like the impact was so, I can't tell you how great the impact was, but I remember it so specifically.
Yeah.
And I also remember like Clan of the Cave Bear and those I was 7th and 8th grade. Cause I know we'd have these, I don't even know if people do this anymore. We'd have these field trips where they'd have like a coach, like type bus, and you would drive like up and down the East Coast and you would go to like, I don't know. We went to like battle places, the Amish country, like all these like random things up and down the East Coast. But it was always like a week-long trip for school and you had a lot of time because you had to be on the bus. And so that's when I read Clan of the Cave Bear. I remember reading that. I was probably, we did the trips in both 7th and 8th grades. I don't remember, maybe 5th grade and 6th grade too. But I remember reading those kinds of things. And in retrospect, I don't even know what they were. Like, I have no categorization for that.
Yeah,
but I did find them fascinating. And they were the kind of thing that, well, you would, I don't know, maybe libraries now have more books, but I always felt like you were like waiting. It came your turn, you read it and you returned it, and then you're waiting for the next one.
Yeah. I mean, I read so many different things I can't even remember, but it was like that. You go to the library and you check things out and then you'd read them and yeah, I don't remember what they were because they were, I don't want to say they weren't memorable. It was just, if it wasn't a horse book, it wasn't as shocking as V.C. Andrews or Stephen King,
right.
Yeah, I said V.C. Andrews was horrible. I didn't mean the stories were horrible. I mean, they were compelling. I meant it was horrible at my age to read them.
Well, I don't know if brother-sister incest is like,
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, it is, I mean... Yeah, as an adult, you're like, oh, huh. But as a kid, it was so taboo. Like that, and also it was one of, I found this book later, but I read a book in the 80s that was like a sibling romance. And I was literally like glued. Like I read that book twice because I was like, I can't, and now I understand that became a whole thing later. But when I was a child, it was so taboo.
Oh, yeah.
And so like those kinds of things stick with me. I read tons of things that I don't remember. And my mother had a thing for English novels. So I read a lot of English novels, which I still like English novelist storytelling and Irish novelist storytelling is my favorite. But that's because that's what we had at home. And the books, like, because I think you had to send them, freight was a lot of money. They were the pages were super thin. Like you'd see through them and the type was really small. But I found them all compelling, and it was also in the house, and I didn't have to go very far to find them.
That's
so how
cool.
many books have you written to date now?
Oh my, I counted it up recently and I never remember. This is just terrible. I think I may have just finished the 64th or 66th book.
Mm-hmm.
I can't quite recall, which is awful, but I count them up and I'm like, oh, that many. And then the next time I think about it, I don't remember what it was, but I want to say it was in the 60s for sure. 64, 65.
So I'm going to ask you a question I ask a lot of guests. Now that you can look back across your entire oeuvre, as it were, do you find there are themes, with the hindsight being 2020, there are themes that have played out across books that you would not have seen while writing them? The forest for the trees and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of found family is a big one for me. Mm-hmm. And also, even though I had a perfectly lovely family, I often orphan my heroines. I don't know why. Not necessarily.
Because honestly, most books do it. I think because it makes the storytelling easier. I mean, like Harry Potter or anything like orphans are easier to manage.
Right. They're alone. Even if sometimes I purposefully give them a lovely family that's off somewhere else because I'm like, you've had too many of these heroines where their family has died. You need to have a happy family off somewhere. So I will do that. But yeah, I often write, characters are always seeking, my main characters are always seeking that acceptance and that family feeling, I guess, is the theme that surprises me most in a way. But it's also one of the ones readers love. They love found family because I think, especially now, family is about more than who you're related to. It's the family you make. And in these kind of times when sometimes families aren't speaking because of politics, because it does happen, sometimes it's your friends, the family you've made, your close friends that maybe are more of your family to you than the ones you grew up with. So I think found family resonates big time because of that, because the concept of I can still have a family, we don't have to be related. We can be a made family, a found family. I think that concept is comforting to people. It is to me. Even though, again, my family's perfectly lovely.
No, I think it is. I think so I am from New York City and I live in Los Angeles. And while there's a core group of people, obviously, who were born and stay and never leave, there is, because of the kinds of cities they are, a large transient population. And I think in places like this, found family is very important because, look, you're not flying home every 15 seconds. You know what I mean? You can't. Some people do, but you know what I mean? It's just not practical. And so being able to celebrate wins, have people support you during hard times and all of that where you are is very comforting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Lynn Raye Harris, I want to thank you so much for taking your time out to speak with me today. I appreciate it very much. And thank you so much for chatting about horses.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hey, anytime you want to chat about horses, you just call me up. Well, I'll tell you all about them.
And it's a delight talking to you. And I haven't seen you in a while because I don't leave my house much.
No, I hear you. Well, one day we will be at a retreat again together. I hope.
I know. COVID really doesn't.
It did.
That whole thing really so much. But I do greatly appreciate talking to you today, and I can't wait for you to keep on writing.
Thank you so much. I have been happy to be here with you, and it's an honor.
Thank you so much. This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, author Aime Austin. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you share, rate, and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It will help others find and enjoy my conversations with brilliant women creators. Also, please hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I'm the author of the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers.
The first 4 books in the Cole Long series are now live. You can download Outcry Witness, Major Crimes, Without Consent, and The Murders Began to your e-reader right now. I'm also the author of the Casey Court series of legal thrillers. These titles are available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. My next book, His Last Mistress, is available for pre-order wherever you get your books. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Legal Thriller Author. You can find me on TikTok at Social Thriller Author. You can also find this podcast on Facebook at A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversations.